Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Limbus Company video. Today we're going to be using the Devyat association identities for both Rodia and Sinclair, aka the victims of Talisman Sinclair. Their whole gimmick revolves around basically having additional effects when you have a stack of 15 rupture potency and 3 rupture count. Rodia is by far the better of the two identities because, for her specifically, her skill 1 and skill 2, they end up not consuming any rupture count when you reach that threshold, and then her skill 3 gets an extra coin. But of course the downside is that while the rupture stack has reached that threshold, they cannot inflict any rupture whatsoever. And that's why Rodia is the better of the two identities, because since the benefit she gets is that she doesn't consume rupture count, she is actually fairly usable as a result. But Sinclair, on the other hand, he gets to inflict extra defense level down. And then his skill 3 gets a pretty sizable damage buff as well. Obviously, yeah, just from that description alone, it's clear, like, which of these two identities are substantially better off as a result. Rodia can actually do something, and then Sinclair, he gets basically nothing. So, still though, he does have some use, because before he reaches the threshold of the 15x3, he does have some of the best rupture application out of any identity, specifically once he has stacked up enough of his courier trunk status effect to be able to have that +4 rupture count on his skill 2, but that requires him to be at 15, and usually that takes him around like 3 to 4 turns, so he does take quite a lot of time to actually get going, and that's not very good for rupture, considering the fact that you want to build up the rupture stack as quickly as possible. And since he only gets really going once he reaches that level of courier trunk, he ends up in this awkward spot where basically by the time he does have enough to be able to actually do anything, you've already built a rupture stack at that point, and once that happens, then all of his rupture application gets disabled, and thus he becomes basically useless. They are by far just some of the most complicated identities in the game because of how many random, not really random, but just of how many conditionals they have. Like, they need to be at a certain level of courier trunk in order to have good rupture application, and then they have special effects when you're at a certain level of the rupture stack, and it requires so much brain power and just thinking in order to get these identities to work even somewhat effectively that you're better off using literally any other rupture identity, basically, except for Rodia. Rodia's fine. She's a fine identity. The fact that she just doesn't consume rupture count is the saving grace for her. But Sinclair, he's dead in the water. Honestly though, the Devyat identities are definitely some of my favorites from an aesthetic point of view. Like, disregarding all of their rupture application and looking exclusively at their courier trunk, they get a lot of interesting mechanics going on there, because they get substantially stronger the higher their courier trunk status effect is built up. And that's because, well, they're delivery men. Their entire job is to deliver you your packages. And that means fighting through literally everything that's in their way. And as an incentive, well, their courier trunk will literally kill them if they are late. It's a very interesting dynamic going on there. So they're stuck in this sort of middle ground where they start out fairly weak, and then they get ridiculously strong, but then they can't stick around for very long, because if they do, then they'll just start dying. Of course, if you're actually using them in a real team, instead of, you know, trying to solo with them or duo with them in this case, the whole fact that their courier trunk literally tries to kill them doesn't really matter because both of them have the ability to retreat. They were the first introduction of the retreat mechanic for the entire game, so it makes sense that they would have it. And that also gives them a lot more like viability when it comes to Rupture in particular, because even though like Sinclair is particularly bad when it comes to Rupture, you don't have to play with him for the entirety of the fight. Like, you can have him slot him on the team for the very beginning, have him help build up a Rupture stack, which he can do. It's not that effective until he's got his courier trunk built up, but he is still capable of helping to build a Rupture stack early on. And then once you do reach that 15x3 Rupture threshold, then you just pop his defense skill, get him out of there, and replace him with somebody who can actually support the Rupture stack at that point. Really, though, the biggest killer of these identities is the Heisho Mao branch, because, yeah, they're completely redundant with their introduction as a result, since all of the Mao identities, they're more or less Rupture count neutral, just like Rodia. But the difference is they can actually continue to build up the Rupture stack, whereas Rodia can't. She's just stuck. And they have the same amount of coins as her, with her skill 4, or skill 3. They have 4 coins on their skill 3, just like Rodia. So, yeah, the Mao branch effectively completely invalidates these identities. The real question, though, is whether or not C Rodia is better than Devyat. And personally, I would say C is definitely better. And that's purely because C has even more coins on her skill 3. Theoretically. Like, Rodia is Devyat Rodia is better at supporting Rupture just because she doesn't consume any count, so you can just basically ignore her. You don't need to think about her unless you're using her skill 3. Whereas for C, you do still need to worry about her, and she is reliant on winning clashes somewhat in order to be able to support Rupture. So it is definitely tricky to pinpoint which one of them is actually better for Rupture. Because on the one hand, you know, Devyat Rodia doesn't consume Rupture count, so she's very easy to use. But C Rodia, she relies on winning clashes in order to maintain a Rupture stack. Or I should say, in order to have positive Rupture count infliction, or neutral. And her skill 3 has even more coins than Devyat's skill 3, coming in at around 5 instead of 4. So, pick your poison, really. Do you want convenience with Devyat, or do you want more Rupture damage with C? That's really the main caveat between the difference between the two of them. Of course, C is also a lot more reliant on poise, and she's not the best at building a poise stack, and thus that it introduces a lot of variance in how effective she can be with her coin reuse. And that's another reason why Devyat is definitely probably the more reliable identity, because you always know what she's going to do no matter what. There is no variance there. And lack of RNG is always a good thing no matter what. Something else I want to talk about that's kind of unrelated to the identities themselves, but it's about the new feature of Project Moon's in-combat speech bubbles. Now that it's base game, and you don't need to download a mod for it anymore, it's very nice, very good that we have an actual, like, canon translation to all of these lines, basically. But something I was kind of hoping for when I was using these identities is for Polonitsa to be translated. Because if you have ever used Northern Wales dialogue box mod, you would know that there are some lines that he couldn't translate, and Polonitsa was one of them. For some reason, the dialogue lines is like associated to something that's separate from the identity itself, and so you can't link the dialogue box to them or something. I don't know. But point is, Polonitsa was one of the things that couldn't be translated, and so I was kind of hoping that Project Moon would be able to translate them in this, and they kind of do, at least with Rodia's skill 3 when she gets to reuse the fourth coin. But as you could clearly see in this video, it's bugged. Devyat Rodia's text box translation is bugged because she's playing, because it's showing the translation box for the dialogue that she says when she's supposed to reuse the third coin of her skill 3 when she's not actually reusing that coin. And then when she does reuse the coin, it doesn't appear. So, yeah. There's a... She's bugged with the in-combat dialogue boxes. Definitely a strange bug. Never would have expected it to happen, but no, there you go. It's there.
징계팀 직원이라면 간단한 판단이긴 해. 비켜주시면 안
부위 하나가 파괴되었어. 이대로 똑같이만 한다면 모든 부위를 파괴시킬 수 있어. 승객이 딱콩 한 방 먹었어.
비켜달라고 했잖아요. 있는 힘껏 찔러놓고 으깨놨지만 저것들은 언젠가 다시 재생하기 얼마나 완벽하게
여유로웠어.
그지없는
아예 여기서 밥 좀 먹다가 출발해도 될 것 같은데. 다들 식량 꺼내.
Anyway, that's it for me. The Devyat Association is very cool. I wish we had more of them. They're a very interesting faction. And the way they play is very fun with how tanky they can be and how powerful they are. With the time limit too. Like I wish we had more identities with a limited amount of time on the battlefield. I think currently we only have like 3 or 4. I know there's the Devyat fixers obviously, and then Full Stop Heathcliff. There might be more. I don't remember. But anyway, like and subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.